What's up, guys? Welcome to the Crossview podcast. Hopping into several topics today. Super excited about all of them. You may see we have a few new pictures on the set. I'm going to ask Aaron to give us the introduction here.
Setting the background scenery, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Lee Strobel, Josh McDowell, Jay Warner Wallace. I was wearing the same polo. Really weird that happened, but all different times that I met those guys.
Yeah.
They're some of my favorites.
He has more than
If you
one
don't know
shirt.
those names, look them up.
Yeah.
But
good stuff.
hey,
apologies.
Before we start,
Yep.
I didn't tell you I was going to do this.
Mhm.
We need to mention that we have some resources. Number
Yeah.
one, we have merch for the show on TrueStrengthApparel.com.
Link in the description.
Some Crossview podcast merch, and there will be more coming soon. Also, Marcus over there, humbly just sitting there, writing like 6 books that are out.
Yeah.
What is it? 5, 6, 4?
Somewhere on there.
Yeah. Commentaries, Bible studies, life story, got all kinds of stuff out. And you can go on the Gospel and Culture website.
Also in the description.
What's the website again?
Gospel N, the letter N.
Just the letter N, that's right.
.com.
Yeah, gospelculture.com. And I don't have anything yet like that book-wise, but things are in the works.
Things are in the works.
So, yeah.
Good stuff.
We never mentioned any of that before.
No, I think we loosely mentioned, like, hey, there's links. Check out some stuff.
Yeah.
But, yeah. No,
We've been pretty bad about that so far. But, yeah, links are in the show notes. Check it out.
Yeah.
Let's jump into it.
Yeah, appreciate you remembering that. Cool. So we started with some apologists. The reason being that our first topic is kind of an apologetic discussion. It kind of was brought up by a friend of mine's family member asking him questions about the faith and the exclusivity of Christianity and Jesus, and kind of how to respond to that. So what do we say, Aaron, to those who think it's harsh that Christianity claims to be exclusive, that Christ claims to be exclusive, that he is the only way to heaven, he's the only way to get salvation, to receive salvation? Yeah. What about those who have never heard or didn't grow up in Christianity?
First part,
Mm-hmm.
think that it's harsh to be exclusive. Number one, all truth is exclusive. That's just how truth works.
Yeah.
It always is. And so all truth is exclusive, number one. Two, I think the addressing the harsh part, I think you could go a couple different ways. One way with this would be, I would maybe just question, where do you even get the idea that it's harsh?
The morality argument,
like
right?
you making that moral judgment claim.
Yeah.
Where does that come from? And then you go the moral truth route. So in other words, like, for you to make that moral claim, there has to be a moral truth.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that moral truth, and where does that moral truth come from? And because if it's just a moral subjective truth, then, like, somebody tells me that idea is harsh to them, and then I could just say, I don't care. Well.
Yeah.
So, if we're living in this subjective world of truth, then I just say that I don't think it's harsh. Now what? Now we have opposite answers. And, in this subjective truth world, that this made up world I'm creating right now in this moment, in this subjective truth situation, one says it's harsh, one says it's not, and there's nowhere to go from there. But because we live in an objective truth world, it leads to further conversation, because there has to be an objective moral truth that's based off of, that claim is based off of.
Yeah.
To say that something like that is harsh. Number two, maybe go the route of, God said it. God can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, questioning, who am I as a person to say that something's harsh that that God has implemented.
Mm-hmm.
Because God is all wise, God is all knowing, and therefore He allows things and does things that are outside of my understanding fully.
Right.
And that's just how it's going to be.
Yeah.
So I think it's maybe, I know a lot of people get hung up on the harsh part. They get hung up on the moral side, the moral claim part, because they just, we live in such a feelings-based society that, everything is just like,
If it doesn't make me feel good,
if it doesn't make you feel good or it doesn't give you good vibes, like you just kind of, you don't rock with it.
Sure.
And it's like, well, that doesn't mean that there isn't things we have to wrestle with.
Sure.
And, also maybe give some comfort too, to say that some very big name, outspoken Christians throughout history have wrestled their entire life with questions like this. And so this isn't a new thing. It's not a new thing. It's not, it's not a question that's ever been discussed, that's never been asked before. That's the one thing that I realized. It's just kind of a general sentiment. When I started realizing or jumping into apologetics like a decade ago, after a couple of years, and this all clicked, I think, when I heard somebody say it, but the point is, people initially, you think that, oh man, I'm just going to be overwhelmed with the amount of questions that can be asked. In reality, while there are a ton of individual questions, the reality is that basically all of these questions that could be asked fall under only a handful of categories.
Mm-hmm.
And so then once you realize what category the question falls under, then you can kind of address what's really behind the question.
Yeah.
And
I think Greg Koukl always says, that always says there's something behind the question.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I've been doing a lot of talking. Why don't you speak to that?
Yeah, no, you're good. I think it's Frank Turek that always says that, you have to steal from the Bible and steal from Christianity,
Steal from God.
Especially when you're talking about
He's got
morality.
A book, Stealing from God.
Yeah, check it out. It is really, I've seen a lot of videos from it. I haven't read the book myself, but yeah, in order to make the moral argument against God, you have to actually steal from God's standard and God's morality. Yeah. So for anything to be harsh, you have to first believe that there is a God and that it's the God of the Bible, really. And so it doesn't defeat what the argument is against it. But go ahead. Yeah.
One honest point on that, though, I will say that I have seen that going that route with people is not necessarily the best approach right off the bat for most people.
Yeah.
Because it very easily can turn into you're just trying to out-argue them. When it's always best to not have that approach. It's always best to get to the heart of the person and like really deal with them.
Yeah.
And not just try to out-argue their point. Yep. So everything we just said, it's really good to know, and you should know it. You should learn it, because there are people out there that want that argument to happen because they will legitimately, by you out persuading them, which is biblical. Paul, used persuasion in the New Testament many times to the councils that he spoke to. By you persuading, certain people, they will be changed because of that.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it is important to know, but I'm just saying it can be it can be looked down, because a lot of Christians look down upon it because it's too argumentative to them.
Look down on apologetics in general, like
sometimes, yeah. Like, I just want to love people I just want to love people to Christ. Yes, your answer's not wrong.
Right.
But
love them by answering their questions.
When you break down what is loving somebody, that's answered many, many different ways. Yeah. And one of the best ways to love somebody, you can't fully love somebody without giving them truth.
Yeah. I saw today on social media, I want to say it was Tim Stratton that shared it, from Leviticus, and it was like there was a passage. I want to say Leviticus 19. Anyway, it said, "Rebuke your brother or your neighbor The very next verse is, I'm kind of paraphrasing, by doing so, you love your neighbor as yourself. Like, it's that same passage.
Yeah,
But it talks about
there
rebuking your
actually,
neighbor.
there's a Proverbs on that.
Yeah.
Rebuke from a friend.
Yeah. But you even talked about like gentleness and like respect, which is the like not arguing people to win arguments, but like winning souls and understanding you're talking to a person that you're not trying to offend them or argue with them to win an argument, but ultimately win their soul, which goes to, I think it's First Peter, right, 3:5, talks about give a defense for your faith,
Yeah.
but do so with gentleness and respect. And so we're not out here just trying to win arguments for the sake of argument's sake, but understand you are talking to a person whose soul is an eternal soul, and so you're either going to hell or heaven. So don't try to win an argument. Try to understand you're talking to a person that you want to persuade to Christ.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that Proverbs I thought of it's Proverbs 27:5-6. Better is open rebuke than hidden love. Wounds from a friend can be trusted, but an enemy multiplies kisses.
that's good. Yeah. So I mean, I definitely understand the gut punch of like, well, what about those who never heard about Jesus, or what about those, who grew up Hindu, grew up Buddhist, grew up in like these areas of the world that you're just not exposed to the gospel, and you're just raised up in whatever your parents were. And there's real consequences if you don't go along with that. Like, if you want to say you're a Christian in a Hindu society, you could your face your life being taken. Like, it's not like a small thing to just be like, I just want to change my religion. I just want to follow something else. Like,
Same thing with Islam.
Yeah, same thing with Islam.
I mean,
it depends on what area of the world you are and things like that.
Yeah, it depends what sect of those religions too.
Yeah.
But I mean, in a lot of Islamic circles, if somebody converts to Christianity, they're completely shunned by all family.
Yeah.
And so in other words, like that mean like they have nobody.
Right. Yeah.
And in the extreme sects, they can be killed.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, Nabil Qureshi has he wasn't that extreme. It was more of a disowning of the family, and not really over time that kind of soothed itself, I guess, alleviated itself a little bit. May you rest in peace. But also there's a Instagram, Hidden Christians, if you guys want to check it out as well. He was a Hindu, now follows Christ, and he kind of is a platform for him to talk about why it is important for those who have come out of whatever religion that they are honest about their faith now in Christ, and how to kind of navigate that switch.
So is he like Vivek?
I don't know. That's a good question. But Romans 1 is also a good place to go when we talk about, because almost the question itself is not necessarily even a real reality. Like, it's not an actual reality according to the scriptures in the way that a person may ask the question, right? That, well, what about people who've never heard? Well, what about people that just don't have access to this information about Jesus?
Mm-hmm.
And the Bible kind of speaks to this. And so I'll read Romans 1:20-21. It says, for since the creation of the world, so from the very beginning, God's invisible attributes, both his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse. Verse 21, for even though they knew God, they did not glorify him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish heart was darkened. It even talks about suppressing the truth in the scriptures, I think in the same passage. So these people have an understanding to the extent in which God has revealed it to them. It's clearly revealed himself so that it can be understood, and they're without excuse. And so there's a level of knowledge that all people have, all human beings have, of the divine. Now, whether they know the name Jesus, whether they can quote passages from the Bible, whether they even know the Bible even exists, doesn't necessarily say that matters. It just, I personally will go as far to say, I think they're held accountable for what they do know. And if they reject that, then I think they're rejecting Christ, and therefore, face eternal judgment. But if they accept what God has clearly made clear to them, what the scripture says is made clear to them, all people, then God will hold them accountable for the knowledge they do have.
Apply Romans 1, what you just read.
Mm.
I don't think I've ever thought about this before, but it just hit me. With Noah, he was found to be the only righteous man because of his faith. He was found to be the only righteous man on all of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And we know what happened there. God hit reset.
Mm-hmm.
Job was, the only righteous man, not only, but he was the most righteous man. Forget the wording used, but he was a righteous man found in his time, and typically Job is known as the oldest
Mm-hmm. First book written.
oldest written book of the Bible, so super old. Mm-hmm. So I bring that up to say that I think Noah is a good example. Noah was surrounded by wicked, evil people, mm-hmm. and
good point.
He had some sort of understanding that God existed. Mm-hmm. This was before Jesus. This was before written scripture. Mm-hmm. This was before all of that.
Yep.
But he had faith that they're like, okay, I'm looking around, I'm seeing all this stuff, this land and everything. Somebody created this. Somebody made this, and I'm gonna seek after and have faith in the God that did this. Mm-hmm. Everybody around him's wilding out, mm-hmm. but he was saved through his faith. Mm-hmm. Abraham was saved through his faith, and so I think that speaks to what the point you made with how you phrased it good. How'd you say it? You're saved. They're held accountable to according to what they know,
right?
And reverse that and bring it to us in Western society, and even America, especially America, when even the most hardcore devout atheists, there's like a 98.9% chance that they've heard the full gospel, mm-hmm. and maybe even know some of the scriptures themselves.
Yeah.
And that person is denying God.
Yeah. Very often.
So what does that say to us who have all these tools and all these resources and all this availability? We have all these scripture, these different Bibles we can get. Yeah. And so what are we doing with it?
Yeah.
What are we doing about it? How are we using those resources to reach the people around us?
Yeah.
I try to think of things like this as like a reverse it and use it as a challenge. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Romans 1 is a very good thing to think about with this topic.
You mentioned earlier when you first started talking about it too. There was I think it was just in the context of the morality discussion and having to kind of steal the morality piece in order to make the argument against Christianity. But I think in that you mentioned humility, essentially. I don't know if you use those words, but that's what I heard, was that there was almost a humility, again, understanding who God is and trusting him.
Yeah.
And saying, God, you're all powerful, all knowing. And if that's true, then who am I to kind of question you? And if I'm going to believe you're good, as the scriptures teach that you are good, then you have all that figured out. I don't have to figure it out. It's not my job to find out, or I'm not going to believe until that guy in India, well, India's actually a Christian nation, but wrong. Some other unreached people group that, maybe doesn't know. And like, unless they find out, I'm not going to believe. That's a very arrogant, prideful kind of posture. And so I would say deal with that as well, to making sure that you're coming at it with the right posture, because like you said, truth is truth. And so it's not dependent on if what's going on in some unreached people group or, what we think God's motive might be, because we know God is good.
Yeah.
I'll also say that, you look out throughout human history, and you mentioned some really, perfect examples of Noah, Abraham. Like, again, they were it was counted as righteousness because of their faith, for what they did know at the time. But even just look at like more recent history of like, I always think of the Native Americans who, in a lot of ways, were isolated from the rest of the world. Well, just like every other kind of original Aboriginal people group, if you will. They were isolated from the rest of the world, but yet within their own culture, and you see this throughout every people group, they had a religion. They had their ideas of what the divine was. They knew within themselves there was the divine because of what they saw around them, because of just again innately, and the scriptures even teach that there's innately a law written on our hearts, and so there's this understanding of a standard to someone that's higher than us, and so they all have that. They show that they know that. Now, whether they're placing that faith in the right God or not is a different discussion, which is what we're having. But
we're made to worship.
Yeah,
every human being is made to worship. So we're going to worship something. It's just a matter of, are we worshiping the right thing or the right person, and the right truth.
Right.
And as far as exclusivity of Christianity, this is one of those ones where well, all right, real quick, because like the little I do know of Hinduism in a lot of ways, some people believe is the most tolerant religion in the world, because within Hinduism, you can still you can be a Hindu, but like so many different Hindus believe all kinds of different things.
Right.
Because like within Hinduism, there's over 300 million gods, and so you can believe all kinds of stuff. In terms of monotheistic, which is one God,
right.
So it's a supreme being, religion that only has one Godhead,
right.
Monotheistic. There's Christianity, there's Islam and Judaism, and a lot of people will say, "Oh, well, you guys just all worship the same God. You're all Abrahamic faiths, right? You all came from Abraham," because they did. And the point is, Islam is worshiping the wrong God. It's not the same God,
right.
Because they followed the wrong brother, the wrong son from Abraham.
Ishmael. Yeah.
They followed Ishmael, and that's not God's chosen line of people. Judaism, same God, but they're missing the rest of the story.
The Messiah.
And they're missing the Messiah that came. That's Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Christianity, I'm just kind of boiling things down is what I'm doing right now. Yeah. Christianity is the whole picture.
Yeah.
And I mean, you get it. Obviously, there's Buddhism, which is real big. I think it's like 1 billion people in the world that are Buddhists. But Buddhist ultimately is actually atheistic, because there is no God figure. It's all kind of just like within yourself, and
go deep enough, you can become aware.
You reach nirvana through anyway. So, and then there's atheism. But what do atheists typically do? They worship science a lot of times.
Yeah, materialistic. Kind of materialism is their religion.
Materialistic. Yeah. So, and these are general statements. Obviously, within each one of these, there's a nuanced way of, and there's some large groups of people who differ from the statements I made. But anyway, the exclusivity of Christianity is cool because it is of Jesus. So, real quick, if I can say this, Jesus Christ of Nazareth is the only figure, the only person that's been in that actually is in every single major world religion. Jesus Christ is mentioned in the Quran. For Islam, Jesus Christ is mentioned in Hinduism as even some sects of Hinduism actually worship Jesus. They just don't worship the true Jesus. But it is actually Jesus Christ.
Right.
Buddhism sees Jesus as some sort of another Buddha, just not the Buddha, but like he is a Buddha figure.
Right.
Most intellectual atheists do believe that Jesus Christ, the human, existed. So in every major worldview, every religion, Jesus Christ is the only one. He's the only figure that crosses crosses all these different barriers, and he's in every single one.
Yep.
So then Dr. Craig Hazen makes the point. He studied world religion. That's what he did his PhD in. Dr. Craig Hazen from Biola University, he runs the apologetic department. He always says, what I always tell people is, this is him speaking. What I always tell people is, if every religion and worldview has Jesus in it, then and you want to just and you're searching and you're looking and finding out what the truth is, then start with the one that's all about him, which is Christianity.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily Judaism, because like I said, Judaism rejects Jesus Christ as the Messiah.
Yeah.
But Christianity has all of the Old Testament and we'll say Judaism, but then also has the finished product.
Well, I wouldn't even say Judaism even necessarily doesn't include him, because it does. They would probably just say he was a rabbi, a good teacher. He taught Judaism.
Well, that is true,
to some extent, right?
He's a rabbi.
He's there. They just minimize him to just a person.
The point is, Jesus in John 14:6, I am the way. This is Jesus speaking. I am the way. First, there's so many different things in this verse to break down, but I am, first of all, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. No one comes to the Father except through me, Jesus Christ. That's, through him as the Son of God, through him as the Messiah that Judaism talks about. That is a fulfillment of all the Old Testament prophecy. Through him, he is the true Messiah. So it's Jesus making these exclusive claims, and there's other parts of Scripture where he does the same thing.
Yeah, it's throughout his ministry,
and that's just kind of the most well-known, easiest, simplest one. John 14:6. So it's kind of like a lot of people, because we live in this kind of fluffy, soft, feelings-based world. It's always kind of like, oh, well, I worship God and I worship God too. Why can't we all just get along? Well, yeah, you worship something, but what do you say about Jesus? Because in reality, the truth is, when it comes down to it, what do you say about Jesus?
Right.
And because Jesus made these claims, so as many people have said throughout history, Jesus of Nazareth, the man, he either was a liar, a lunatic, or Lord. So which one is he? And which one do you say he is for you?
Yeah.
Those are basically the most important questions of any individual person's life.
Yeah. Because he can only be one of those things. He can't be, literally, he's either who he said he is, Lord, or he's lying, or he really believed it and he wasn't, which makes him a lunatic.
Which makes him crazy, man.
So literally, you only have three options, because we know he existed. Like Aaron and I have gone. He's mentioned Biola. We've both taken the certificate of apologetics at Biola. So Aaron's been studying apologetics for years. So, I mean, the evidence is there. We're not going to sit here and go through them. We'd be here for hours, probably days. But the evidence is there. This man existed. He lived. We're going to go as far, obviously, because we've done the research that he died. He was buried in a tomb, rose again 3 days later. There were eyewitnesses. So this stuff is true. And so you can go and test the claims of the Bible. You may say, like, oh, well, your Bible says that he said he's the only way. But how do we know your Bible's true? Well, all those things can be answered. Go do the research. We have a lot of resources to do that.
J. Warner Wallace just came out with his most recent book is Person of Interest. The point of that book is to show how Jesus, one, is the truth, Jesus really existed, and that you can prove that he is who the Bible says he is without using the Bible.
Yeah.
And the way that he does that is he shows that this man that lived 2,000 years ago and only was known for 3 years of his life literally has impacted to this day every single part of society and every single part of the world in ways that aren't going away.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, who is this guy?
Right.
Who is this dude?
Right.
I mean, we have Alexander the Great, who took over the world in large part. The Mongol guy. I was trying to think of his name before. The Mongol Empire. Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan. Okay. He took over the largest territorial part of the world ever, more than anybody else.
Yeah.
And Julius Caesar, all these different guys who have had all this great power in the world. Nobody even comes close to having the impact on the world that Jesus Christ had as just a poor carpenter that lived 2,000 years ago and was known for 3 years.
Yeah. So you might want to look into it.
And so it's like, I mean, J. Warner Wallace, Person of Interest, but all his stuff, the cold case Christianity, God's Crime Scene, all that. Josh McDowell has lived, he's 80 something now. He spent the last 6 decades traveling the world talking about Jesus and the truth that is him. He has hundreds of books, literally, about this. Lee Strobel has the whole Case series. The Case for Christ is his book. Watch the movie, The Case for Christ. It's a really good movie.
If you don't read and watch the movie, it's pretty easy. Dude literally tried to. His whole testimony is that he tried to disprove Christianity. That was his goal. He was not looking to become a Christian or a believer. He was trying to disprove it, and he literally just the evidence was just what it was, and obviously followed Jesus.
One last thing. Recently, Joe Rogan came out. I think it was episode 2008 on his podcast, the Joe Rogan Experience. He had what I would say is his first legit Christian on that can joust with Joe. Yeah. And that was Stephen C. Meyer from the Discovery Institute. And he is a science. He's a science. He's a scientist, PhD, philosopher of sorts, and a genius level guy. Mm-hmm. But his specialty is in intelligent design and proving the existence of God through science and all that, and philosophy. Mm-hmm. But he doesn't have a specialty in Jesus. Mm-hmm. So in that conversation, Joe over time has always been very critical of Christianity. And, he always throws out jabs here and there and all that. Yeah. But he's starting to be a little more accepting of the idea of the existence of a being, of a supreme being. Based off of there has to be at least one miracle that's ever happened. Creation. Yeah. So he's accepting of the existence of maybe God. We say God, he would say something different, but he's accepting of that. Mm-hmm. What I want to see Joe have is somebody like these guys or somebody else that has a specialty in Jesus, and then Joe just getting grilled for 2 hours about it. Yeah. Because he's not going to have answers. Yeah. And anyway, that's what I want to see.
No, that's good. That's good. Hopefully that happens.
I feel like I'm all fired up.
Hey, Aaron's the apologetics guy, so I know he could go for a while on this. But talked about a divine being. I think that actually brings us into, of course, what Joe would call him, just a general divine being or whatever.
Here we go.
But that brings us into a topic.
You ready?
Yeah, man. Brings us into a topic of aliens and UFOs.
Hey.
So we're here. We're no turning back now. So yesterday, we're recording as of July 27th. Yesterday, July 26th, there were hearings at Congress, U.S. House Oversight Committee had I think a few, not just one guy, but I think a few.
I know there has been a few.
Yeah, there's been a few different hearings, but I don't know if there were one. I know it was at least one. Anyway, they had a testimony from some witnesses that were basically, I guess you can call them whistleblowers in some sense, of just kind of talking about some of the things that
themselves.
Yeah, I guess. So just kind of reporting on some things that they had seen while this guy was, I think, in the military. Long story short, there were some videos, some pictures that the government would identify as what they call UAPs, unidentified aerial something phenomenon. Yep.
They changed it to be more PC for some reason because I guess UFO gets a lot too much backlash.
Well, it's just been used too much in Hollywood, so they probably just don't want to. But anyway, yes, they call them UAPs. But anyway, so there's been some evidence, quote unquote, whatever. And so we figured, why not jump into this discussion about aliens, UFOs? What are these things that we're hearing about? Some stories that people say they've had these experiences and whatnot.
We're either going to get some new fans or they're going to turn us off right now.
Yeah, it's probably freaking some people out. But just like, how do we deal with this as Christians? How does this fit into our biblical worldview? It's kind of how we want to deal with this. And so we'll say there the man Dave Grush, I believe his name was, one of the main test witnesses at the hearing. He said things like there were recovered what they call biologic non-human biologics, meaning that there were
biological beings that were not human,
but specifically that they had recovered body parts, which is I think what they mean by biologics. So that they had gotten non-human biologics, as in body parts or in some internal stuff of whatever body it is. They don't say alien because they don't want it, because that denotes the origin of where, like, oh, it must have not come from here. It's possible it did come from here. We just don't, it might be another being that we just didn't know about, that lives here on Earth. So anyway,
dun, dun, dun.
They had recovered that. Apparently, again, his testimony, Pentagon, other government agencies believe he's lying. I don't want to get too deep into this. Just want to kind of set the context. And he's also said that there have been threats to him, to people that have whistleblowed. Whistleblowed, is that the okay? That have thrown this information out there that haven't been exactly received well.
Yeah.
Obviously, government agencies don't really like that they're doing this. But it's been thrown out there to the public, and so we want to discuss it. And especially, again, like I said, as Christians with a biblical worldview, what do we do with this?
You want to play the clip now, or?
Let's discuss. We'll play a clip. So what Aaron's just mentioning is we listen to. Aaron's been trying to get me to listen to this podcast for the longest. I have been strictly not happening. They finally got me with the last episode of the season, so came perfect timing, obviously, with all this going on. But we're gonna rap about this a little bit, and then we're gonna play a clip at the end because we think they honestly just did a great job of kind of teeing it up and hitting it out the park, of just kind of wrapping it all up in a bow. But
yeah, Haunted Cosmos.
Haunted Cosmos is podcast. Yeah.
So again, links in the show notes. So aliens, extraterrestrial beings. What do we do with this?
Well, how do we define aliens? Like, because you just kind of like, are we defining aliens as extraterrestrial? Meaning what? Because I would say, and I've heard this even going through, like I said, the Biola class with apologetics, that there are arguments against, well, why did Jesus, what were other alternatives to Jesus dying, being buried, and resurrected?
Yeah.
He was an alien.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, technically, you're right. He was an alien. He was not of this world. And so he's a spiritual being that became flesh and dwelt among us. So in that respect, he's an alien.
His body was here from here.
So
interesting.
How do we define alien? And go from there.
This is I'm so fascinated by this topic, but I still don't have all my thoughts together on it. It's relatively new for me jumping into this.
Yeah.
But
well, what were some of the conclusions we got from listening to Haunted Cosmos?
Well, straight up that these are demons.
Okay.
And dun dun dun. So so I think the idea behind that is that there are well, let me first throw this name out here. Michael Heiser. Michael Heiser is a theologian who actually recently passed away from cancer. But for years, he studied in some areas that aren't usually touched by guys like him, credentialed, Hebrew scholar type guys.
Yeah.
And what he did a lot of work in was what he would call the unseen realm.
Mm-hmm.
He has a book called that. He has a documentary called that. We're going to post that link in the show note. Mm-hmm. It's a free documentary you can watch on YouTube, mm-hmm. The Unseen Realm. And again, I haven't fully read all his books and stuff like that, so I don't know all of his positions. But he does a lot of discussion around. There actually is a lot of scripture, especially Old Testament, that brings up interesting questions and conversations around what are these other like divine beings, these mm-hmm. supernatural beings that seem to be mentioned a fair amount in scripture.
Yeah.
What are some different names for them? Well, obviously, demons is one name, but watchers mm-hmm. is one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course now I'm blanking. But obviously there's a lot of controversy around the Nephilim
Mm-hmm.
and the fallen angels,
Yep.
and I think it's in Psalm in several places, but like a council of I forget the words, but council of divinity, council of other beings.
Yeah.
What is that?
Right.
Council of heavenly beings might how it's said, but
because you literally see God talking to Satan, and there's other spiritual
Job,
beings, right?
Like Job is literally some sort of crazy cosmic
meeting,
like
God, Satan, some other
back and forth between God and Satan.
Yeah.
What is that?
Right.
What do you do with that?
Right.
I mean, it's some crazy stuff. It's fascinating, and I know that there are a lot of people who would have some pretty good answers. I just don't seem to have very conclusive answers at this point because I haven't really studied it too much.
Yeah, I'll say the same.
But I have got into it a little bit, and most of my getting into it is through listening to this podcast, Haunted Cosmos. And what's really cool about them is they always approach it from a biblical viewpoint, a biblical worldview. That's their whole point. Like they're just personally fascinated with this topic,
right?
But they're also like, I think one of them might even be a pastor, but they're like theologian guys, and so they want to know, how does this all work, and what's really going on here. To me, it's kind of one of those things like. Sort of similar. Maybe I'm wrong, but sort of similar along the lines of the idea of miracles. A lot of people discredit the idea of miracles because a miracle is a supernatural thing. It's something outside of the natural world, right?
Unnatural.
So
uncommon.
for a miracle to happen, it has to be supernaturally, pushed. It has to be something supernatural. So, but one. I think one of the strongest pushbacks I would have against somebody who is against miracles, I would say to them, okay, for miracles to not be true, every single claim of a miracle throughout all human history has to not be true. And at that point, you're talking about millions.
Right.
And okay, take away all the ones that are just hearsay. And break it all the way down to the 0.00001% of miracle claims that actually have like verified data and credible evidence and credible witnesses and stuff like that. All of those you're also saying have to be false.
Right.
So bring it back to aliens. I would apply the same thinking to that, where there has been all of these thousands, millions, maybe, I don't know, but thousands of claims of weird UFO sightings, weird alien beings, or black hole wormholes, weird sightings of it just seemed like this didn't belong in this world, and then it went away, and then like creatures that are physical, but like they're not the normal creature.
We haven't seen it before.
And so I would apply that same thinking and say, okay, for these to not be a thing, all of these claims have to not be true. I can't say that.
Right.
I can't. I don't think there's no way that you could say that.
Right.
Just like there's no way that you could say that every single miracle claim is not true.
Right. So we were saying then that as Christians, we don't necessarily have to have blinders on with this and say like, oh, they're just lying, because it's possible these people are having real experience. In fact, I think we would both agree there are real, most of the time, I think when the people are saying this, especially again with a biblical worldview, I think these people are having experiences. Like this is a real thing that's happening. We would just explain it in a again biblical worldview, which would say, you even mentioned how again historically they're all these, you mentioned all these kind of experiences in the Bible of like these spiritual realm beings existing almost in the same space as other humans. Like, what do you think that I'm thinking of Genesis, I think 19, when angels, like actual angels from God, went to go visit Lot's family, and the people in Sodom and Gomorrah wanted to have sex with them.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think they thought? Like, oh, aliens. Like, they probably were thinking, like, oh, aliens. Like, now, they were so perverted that they wanted to have sex with the aliens. But again, like, these are experiences that happen throughout history. And
I
we
will
think
say
that,
this, though.
yeah,
Let me make a point on that real quick,
Yeah.
just while it's in my head. The society back then, ancient people were much more in tune with the spiritual world than we are, I think, because we're so materialistic.
Yeah.
So I think something like an angel like that situation showing up, I don't think that they would have seen it as like this absolutely insane, crazy thing like we think of as aliens showing up. I think to us, because we've been so indoctrinated with this materialistic worldview, that all of a sudden when something that seems to be from out of here comes in, we're like, holy crap, what's going on here? To them, they were much more in tune with it.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like, all right, this is a little crazy, but this is what it is. Like, I'm just, because they explain because everything that we know of through science, and not everything, but a lot of things that we just know scientifically now, they had their answer was it's spirit, it's a god, it's just the god of the stars, the god of this and that. Anyway, go ahead.
No, it's good. That's
still a good point, though.
I appreciate that, because even as you say that, I think about when Jesus walked on water, and the disciples, the first thing after they saw this being walking on the water, which clearly, again, in the natural doesn't happen, it's impossible, right? Their first thing was, it's a ghost. Immediately their mind's not going to an alien, like from some other life form, but it's, again, spiritual. So no, it's a great point.
I mean, the Greek, what was it, the council that had the statues of all the gods, and they left a blank statue or a blank I'm saying the wrong word, but a blank statue, unnamed god,
for the
because
god.
they were like, well, there has to be another one,
right?
So this is the one that represents that one,
right?
And Paul came in and was like, guys,
I can fill in the gap for you.
That one that you're not naming is the one, and all these other ones are false. Anyway,
for sure. Yeah. So again, viewing all of these things and these experiences that people have, like, again, they're probably very real. I do want to just kind of toss it up again from listening to the Haunted Cosmos podcast. Again, as Christians, we would affirm that we don't think they're extraterrestrial in the sense that they're from some other planet or within the solar system or from a different solar system. Reason being is that if we, again, just take the biblical worldview and the biblical narrative, that, again, the creation story, God had created Earth to be inhabited, and all the other things in the solar system were, as Genesis tells us, signs, seasons, years, days and years, I think it says. So all these things are basically, again, we know that's how our solar system works, why the sun moves the way it does, and that we have a whole 24-hour day. Like, all of that, Bible's clear, which we know science just confirms it while the sun comes around. Like, these things are dictate how we say how long is a week, and how long is a month, and how long is a year. All of that is literally dictated not by some guy who said, oh, we're going to just 52 weeks and we're going to do 7 days. No, that's all dictated by the solar system and how it all works. God dictated that in the way he created everything. So again, we believe that God created Earth to be inhabited and not necessarily anything else. And so what do you do with that? I think that I don't know if automatically, there's probably some Christians that believe it could have that. But then you start getting into, well, did Jesus save them too? Or did you save us as humans? Like, I don't know. And then it just starts getting really wonky. But I will say, again, we propose the idea that these are demons and not necessarily an extraterrestrial or from some other planet. I want to read 2 Corinthians 11. And again, the guys on the podcast mentioned this, but I'll go ahead and read it.
Listen to this closely and probably play it back and listen again after he's done.
So this is 2 Corinthians 11, 12 through 15. It says, but what I am doing, I will continue to do, so that I may cut off opportunity from those who desire an opportunity to be found, just as we are in the matter about which they are boasting. For such men are false apostles, deceitful workers, disguising themselves as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. Therefore, it is not surprising if his ministers also disguise themselves as ministers of righteousness, whose end will be according to their deeds, which is, of course, destruction at the end of all things with him. So, again, we're proposing he disguises himself as ministers of righteousness, whose end is technically according to their deeds, because they're definitely not angels of light, right? So, again, we think of all the different experiences that people have had. Again, we know the spiritual realm breaks into Jesus did it. The spiritual realm breaks into the earthly material realm. And so we know demons are able to do the same thing. Angels, even from God, are able to do the same thing. It says, I think it's Hebrews, it says we can sometimes entertain, sometimes we entertain angels and don't even know it.
We have an angel following us everywhere.
Is that a passage?
Hebrews.
There you
go. Elijah, God opened their eyes to show that we're not outnumbered. All of a sudden he looked around and he's surrounded by an angel army.
Yeah. Yep.
That's all, but that's, to your point, that's the spiritual realm that's always there right now with us.
Right.
But we don't see it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and you see, again, we talked about...
I love this. There's so many different ways to go about it, but it's...
Yeah. I mean, there's explanations, biblical explanations for all these things, which I think, again, time after time, we see that the Bible tells us something that we don't know about science, about the world, and then it gets proven over time. And so I imagine it'll be one of those things as well. But some people will want to believe it, some people won't. But even think about, you talked about the Nephilim earlier, and how, again, similar situation to Sodom and Gomorrah, where they wanted to have sex with the angels from the Lord, but in Genesis 6, I believe there were fallen angels that, again, had relations with human women. And then you had the offspring, the result of that were the Nephilim.
Yeah.
And so, again, spiritual beings break into this realm, like into this world, into the materialistic world. This is a thing. This is a biblical thing. And so just be mindful. It doesn't have to derail your entire faith or your worldview if there are these other beings that aren't human, and it doesn't have to derail anything. Like, it still fits in the biblical worldview. And again, I would argue that this is, again, Bible being our guide and our authoritative truth. I think this explains these things more than Congress and scientists and so on can try to do so. I do want to read this last one.
I'm really resisting the urge to go down some major rabbit trails that I want to right now, but I don't think I'm going to do that to you.
Where did I start with here? So I'm going to read 2 Thessalonians 2, first several passages here. We'll see where I end up. Yeah, I'll probably end around 11. I'm going to start in verse 3. Again, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, starting in verse 3. It says, "Let no one in any way deceive you, for it is. Let me give you some context first. So we're going to talk about a man of lawlessness here who is likely an antichrist kind of figure. I don't know if it's the antichrist. I have to study in a little bit more here. But definitely talking about somebody from Satan's army, if you will. Of course, versus Jesus, who is the ultimate, who is Christ. So just follow along here. Verse 3, "Let no one in any way deceive you, for it is not come unless the apostasy comes first. And the man of lawlessness is revealed, the son of destruction, who opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God, small g, or object of worship, so that he takes his seat in the sanctuary of God, big G, exhibiting himself as being God. Do you not remember that while I was still with you, I was telling you these things?" This is Paul speaking. "And you know what restrains him now, the man of lawlessness, so that in his time he will be revealed. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. And then that lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord Jesus will slay with the breath of his mouth and bring to an end by the appearance of his coming." Jesus is coming. "Whose coming is in accordance, whose coming is in accord with the working of Satan," meaning the man of lawlessness, "with all power and signs and false wonders." Read that again. "With all power and signs and false wonders, and with all the deception of unrighteousness for those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth so as to be saved. And for this reason, God sends upon them a deluding influence, so that they will believe what is false." So we know the enemy comes to kill, steal, and destroy, and confuse as well, right? And so he's masquerading as the angel of light. And we talk about all these stories in the Haunted Cosmos. You guys can listen to this. We're not going to play this part of the podcast, but they talk about the story of, I believe her name was Elizabeth, who had an experience, and her story was that she had an experience when she was young, and then she went back. Then she went back like 18 months later after that, check it out again. And then she was taken, like literally taken, abducted, whatever you want to call it, from Earth, And long story short, spent 9 years at this other planet with this alien named Akon, I think it was.
Had its baby.
Had its baby.
Not
they had
Akon,
relations. It was something like that.
Anik. Something like that.
Okay, maybe. So yeah, maybe something like that. Whatever its stupid name is. So yeah, gets married to the alien, has its babies, whatever. Comes back, is brought back apparently against her will, back to Earth. It had again been 9 years, but it only been 4 months Earth time. Again, it kind of reminds me of the Nephilim stuff. Like again, I don't know this whole perversion with like angels and humans having sex. I don't know what's going on there, but it seems to be a thing. But it does fit like a pattern, and it just is interesting to me because that does fit the same pattern.
I mean, don't get me wrong, she's probably a loony, but who knows? You don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
you don't know.
Can we really say that? Like,
I don't.
And you even think about like how scriptures talk about 1,000 days in his course is 1 day on earth, right? And so the whole 9 years for like somebody who's, I don't know if she has a biblical worldview or not. I don't know if she grew up in the church. I don't know if she has these kind of like things in the back of her mind to kind of apply to it. But I mean, some of those things do kind of pique your interest in like, well, you know, like maybe there's some truth to it. Again, if it happened in Genesis 6, Genesis 19, if it happened, you know, well, who's to say it's not still happening? So again, these are all power, false signs and false wonders, right? So we're all looking now, like again, hearings in Congress, like, oh, we saw this and we saw that. Oh, it's non-human biologics. Oh, da, da, da. Again, they're preparing the confusion for something, and I think we've talked about before. Again, like it sets it up perfectly for the rapture, and because the scriptures does talk about those even after the rapture still won't believe and will say we'll bring some excuse again, some false excuse. It's just like preparing itself for this. Well, it was just a mass alien abduction, right? Like it's literally the Bible's playing out before our eyes. So
it always does. It always has,
and always will. So, should I play the clip?
Yeah.
So we're gonna go ahead and play this clip from Haunted Cosmos. Again, we're gonna have the link in the description. Shout out to those guys. This is just so good. Everything we just said kind of packaged into.
They sum it all up in a way better fashion than we have, and so I highly suggest listen to the rest of their episode. They get into all the these stories and stuff, and give them, because this is one of those topics that's like whoa, who are these crazy tinfoil people? Like give them the time to at least let them give you context, because they're gonna in the beginning they're gonna come off like, oh, who are these guys saying all this crazy stuff? But then they always back it up and give you a lot of context that then makes you go, oh, wait a second. So give them at least that chance. But
you don't want the whole podcast.
I'm talking about just in general, the whole podcast, especially this episode, I would say. Okay. But this is a very good summary. We decided let me just say this. This isn't our preferred method of doing things. Playing somebody else's content like this, especially for a couple minutes, because this is going to be like 3 minutes long. But it's so good, and it so encapsulates. Yeah, encapsulates. Yeah. I said it wrong, I think. But it so encapsulates what we're trying to say. Yeah. And that's why we want to play it just directly, give you what they say, and then let you just look at it on your own.
Yeah, definitely go check out their podcast. Subscribe to it, guys. It's good stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and share this here.
In a biblical worldview, we don't expect alien life to exist. The Bible tells us Earth was formed to be inhabited, and the other celestial bodies were created for signs, seasons, days, and years. It was to Earth that Jesus came to save us, not to another planet to save another race of beings. Many have been taught that life arose on this planet spontaneously and evolved into complex organisms. If it happened here, they believe, surely it could happen elsewhere in the universe. Some believe that these space beings, aliens, hold the key to health and eternal life. An excerpt from an article at answersingenesis.com. If you've listened to other episodes of this show, you can probably guess our stance on the subject of alien encounters and the UFO phenomena. Are all of these stories true? No. People lie. But some of them? We think so, yes. We do think people have seen strange things in the sky. We even think there are a few cases of abduction that are extremely compelling. So what do we make of it? Because we also agree with that quote from Answers in Genesis. We don't expect to see alien life, or at least not in the way the materialists want us to. Consider this passage from the Holy Scriptures. Quote, "And I will keep on doing what I'm doing in order to cut the ground from under those who want an opportunity to be considered equal with us in the things they boast about. For such people are false apostles, deceitful workers, masquerading as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. It is not surprising then if his servants also masquerade as servants of righteousness. Their end will be what their actions deserve." That's from 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 12 to 15. If we don't expect to see alien life, then why does it seem at times as if we do? Our answer is relatively boring, actually. We think they're demons. That's what people are seeing, demons. Fallen angelic beings set on deceiving, killing, destroying, and generally continuing their war against the throne of God. No, these beings are not what popular culture considers them to be, organic life forms of a highly advanced extraterrestrial race, traveling to other planets and galaxies using technological innovations so far beyond our current understanding that they're virtually magical. In the Old and New Testament, we're given countless examples of how active the spirit world is. We just usually can't see it. Think of Elisha praying for the eyes of the son of the prophets to be opened so that he could see their city defended by legions of angels who had the appearance of fire. Consider Daniel's account of angelic watchers in Daniel 4, standing beside the thrones of the kingdoms of men, decreeing their ends. Think of the divine counsel spoken of in Job and the consequences of those meetings on Job's life. What if sometimes, however infrequent, we do get a glimpse into this unseen world? What if men do encounter the very beings Paul warns the Corinthians against? We believe this to be the case. And because it is the case, men ought to be on guard against the schemes and deceits of the enemy. In tonight's episode of Haunted Cosmos, we have a warning for you. Examine their messages. Look carefully to the quote gospel carried by these supposedly alien beings. If you do that, if you look at the messages people reportedly receive in these encounters, you'll find that they are anything but the friendly advice of a new species of sentient life, kindly neighbors from the star system next door. No, these messengers are evangelists, and they come with gospel, false gospel. Their message tips their hand. Their message reveals devil's scales hiding behind alien features.
All right, so that recording was really good. That podcast from the Haunted Cosmos. So guys really should check that out. Hope you guys, again, we're going to have their information in the description below.
That was
again,
so good.
Go check it out. Cool. So we do have a couple more things to kind of discuss before we wrap up the show. So lots been going on. We always talk politics. Recently, Ron DeSantis is running for president. It's been a huge reason for that is for what he's done in Florida.
Make America Florida.
Make America Florida. A lot of it centered around race and his rejection of, again, wokeness, if you will, but more specifically CRT in schools and elementary education, things like that. So recently, with that has come the school board kind of proposing a curriculum, which, again, was publicized. What's that?
School board.
It's Florida. I know as a state, their board of whatever, I guess board of education within the state probably.
Okay. So this isn't like a specific county or something like that?
No, this is like Florida wide. This is definitely a state thing. They did put the curriculum out, and apparently within the curriculum it says something along the lines of, it has language in which, I'm paraphrasing, slaves benefited from being enslaved. Whether that was, again, the idea.
The slaves themselves benefited from being slaves.
Being slaves. Basically, the idea is that they then left or came out of slavery whenever they were either freed or, again, emancipated eventually. That they came out with skills that they then could turn into, again, whatever that's other work, employment for other people, or start their own businesses. And again, the skills that they got. Obviously super controversial to hear it said in that way. I saw a few reactions to it. A lot of conservatives were like, well, but is it true though? And in some sense, yeah, they're definitely slaves that came out with some skills. I think it was, I want to say it was Ali Stuckley that said, was again the same argument, like no one's saying that we should enslave people again, but like again, examine the comment and the statement based on its truth. Is it true or not? I would say it is true. I would say it is true. Byron Donalds actually came out and said, before I go on and further about that, Byron Donalds came out and actually criticized it. Conservative from Florida, definitely supports, I think, Ron DeSantis and what he's done in Florida. He came out and said we shouldn't be using language or putting it in curriculum to somehow ever make slavery look like it was a
It could
positive.
be used as a justification for
right, and I think that's
it.
that, and I would agree with that critique and that fear. The last thing I'll say about this is it lacks context. Like the curriculum itself and what it's claiming lacks a ton of context, and I think it's actually, even to an extent, perhaps just it comes across extremely ignorant, because what it assumes, and just flat, like just saying that without again any context, is that these people didn't have skills or things in the first place from where they came from. In all, I mean, you can go to any people group in the world. I mean, a lot of ways we see some things like pyramids, and now we even talked about the UFO stuff and the alien stuff, but
was giants.
But other explanations for that. But think about again ancient historical cultures that did these amazing things, and we're like, well, how did they do that? With what technology, and the technology that came up to do these things?
Manpower.
And so we just often think that, like, the most recent people or humans today in our generation, we're just the wisest and most technologically advanced society. And we have this kind of arrogance about us, but like these people weren't dumb. They survived too, and we got to this place because of.
Let me just throw this out there: they were
like
smarter than us.
In a lot of ways, I'm sure they were. In a lot of ways, yes.
Yeah.
So just again, I would just say that comment, I think that from in the curriculum in Florida lacks a lot of knowledge and is a little bit ignorant, because these people likely knew how to do things far better than some of us today. So they didn't need slavery to learn skills.
To me, this goes along with the critique that a lot of leftists have towards conservatives, which is they say that conservatives tend to downplay slavery and the evils behind it, and they just kind of want to mention that it was a thing, but like not how bad it was, not how widespread it was,
yeah.
and they just kind of want to move on past it. This is one of those things that like it comes off as like, guys, this isn't really helping our case here.
Right, exactly.
And because of what you said, like it lacks the context behind it, and it obviously gives the leftists a whole lot of ammo, to go with.
I mean, now they're campaigning on it and stuff like Kamala. I just because you just watched the video before we started recording,
Kamala?
And Joe Biden actually said her name wrong. But anyway, Kamala Harris was out campaigning already on that, of like, literally went to Florida, did a whole event now, just when she does a word salads. But yeah, so she's out like talking about how like, it's a whole thing. I won't give too much oxygen to the nonsense of people literally saying, oh, black people can't go to Florida anymore. Yeah, it gets ridiculous, but
that's so dumb.
Yeah.
That's so dumb.
Like a state of emergency or like something stupid. But anyway, yeah, that's all we wanted to comment. We wanted to comment on that because that's what's something going on that's relevant, and we just wanted to kind of throw our 2 cents in there. Another thing going on, Hunter Biden, people are getting indicted, charged, arrested left and right, no matter who you are right now. Trump, you got probably 5 billion other people. Hunter Biden's also one of these guys that's apparently got a plea deal. So we've been expecting that to go through and him plead guilty. It seems like that fell apart in what they thought was going to go smoothly. Judge had some questions about how the plea deal came about. So she halted some stuff up. So they're still trying to work some stuff out there. The one thing I think we wanted to really kind of, or at least I wanted to comment on with this was like, I think we will both affirm that if someone breaks the law, they should be held accountable according, in the justice system, even in regard to how we as culture kind of view them. it should just be equal. Like, regardless of who you're related to, what your last name is, if you're the son of the president or not, you should be treated just like every other American citizen. You're not above the law. We believe that applies to Hunter Biden. So he should be held accountable and not get any special treatment under the law just because he's Joe Biden's son. I think we both affirm that. And so what I'd like to say is that I think what we can't do is be hypocritical or not apply that equally in our own minds and our own opinions and how we think about it. Because you have Hunter Biden, but then you have Jared Kushner. And so if we're going to look at Hunter Biden, who, again, and Joe Biden, they haven't been accused yet, or they've been accused. They haven't been proven yet or charged yet for money coming from Ukraine, money coming from the Middle East or whatever, and getting rich off of these things from China, whatever, and so on and so forth. But if that's happening on the Biden front, and we also know that it's, Kushner got some pretty big payouts at the end of the Trump presidency, again, from some people in the Middle East as well. We should be asking the same questions, I think, on both ends, and not just ignore Kushner if you're a Republican, ignore Hunter Biden story if you're a Democrat, but that they both should be held accountable if, again, they've committed crimes. Jesus is one of Jesus's. I said this before we started. One of Jesus's favorite rebukes of the Pharisees and other people were hypocrites, calling them hypocrites. So probably don't want to do that or be that. And we saw Mitch McConnell even freeze up. What was that, yesterday, I guess? Again, and so you got Republicans now saying, "Oh, well, he'll tell us when he's ready to go. He's fine. If he told us he's fine, we believe him." But when Dianne Feinstein, who hasn't been able to, or even Joe Biden, that's true. That's a good point. When they can't do their job because it's just some mentally, cognitively not there, they're like, "Oh, we got to get him out. We got to get him out." Like, again, we got to be like, you lose credibility when you're not consistent, I think. So we just got to be, as Christians, don't be again, we talked about tribalism a few episodes ago. Don't be a Republican, Democrat. Be a Christian that has a brain, that has the mind of Christ. So just be consistent in all these things. You have comments on Hunter Biden or Mitch McConnell, Feinstein stuff?
Yes. Hunter Biden should be in jail, and we should have term limits.
Agree with the term limits, yes. And Hunter Biden in jail. So just to be clear.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. The Hunter Biden stuff is, it's insane to me that we can have all the evidence in the world that we need to put this guy behind bars, and videos and pictures and text messages and all these things of him doing all these wild things that are illegal, and he's just walking.
Yeah.
And even some of these things get brought to court, and the original deal was like, he's gonna just walk, like he's not gonna end up doing any time for this, because it all just comes down to who he is.
Yeah.
And
I know some IRS whistleblowers came out, and they also were witnesses before Congress saying, like, hey, he wasn't really treated as a regular citizen. He had some special treatment in this whole process. And so those claims should be considered.
Which is so obvious.
I don't know if it's as obvious as you're saying, because you talk about like the cocaine stuff.
Talking about all of it. The tax stuff, the cocaine stuff, the job stuff, the overseas payment stuff, the prostitute stuff, the drug, everything. Yeah.
So the prostitute stuff is under the tax stuff, because it's not illegal to. What is illegal to hire a prostitute? But they
hold on a second.
Yeah, let's back it up.
Actually, that will be legalized probably.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that is. I would say that my point is that is consistent. I feel like, again, if every other American citizen can be held to the same standard, is my question. And so, other American citizens probably aren't going to jail because they hired a prostitute. Is it illegal? Yeah, but probably getting a fine, slap on the wrist, go back home, stop doing this. Even the drugs thing, they're probably putting in some type of rehab. They're probably not going to, unless they're out here selling it, which he might have been. I don't know. But you can't prove that from a video, technically. So stuff like that is like, okay, again, any other American citizen's probably not going to get indicted for those things just based off a video, laptops, things we found. And it's like, so again, I'm okay with, again, it being equal under the law, I'm okay with that. What they did find, and they did charge him for, was putting things like the prostitutes or maybe some other weird things that clearly shouldn't be on his taxes. So like, you can't put a prostitute on your taxes because you went to the strip club to meet with some other business leader or whatever, right? So like, that is, I think, what is in the indictments and he's being held accountable for. Now the question is,
the one big thing was the gun thing, charge,
right? It's because it's a felony.
Yeah.
And so I think ended up saying they basically would drop the felony from his record, I believe. Don't hold me to this, but I think they'll drop it if he stays clean off of drugs and doesn't get any more trouble. Like, it doesn't have the same weight on his record.
I heard that was one of the things that triggered the judge to be like, hold up a second.
Yeah.
What do you mean we're just
Right.
a charge like this? She said a charge like this I've never seen just like be wiped away.
Right.
Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
so why are we doing that?
One of the whistleblowers said that normally, if there's a felony with a misdemeanor, there's something on the books that says you have to do them both. If there is both, you have to do them both. Like, their plea deals are a thing. Like, we're not trying to sit here and say like plea deals shouldn't be a thing or aren't a thing or whatever. They're definitely a thing. But there is something on the books apparently where if this is the case, you can't just ignore the felony. Like, you can't just throw it out. So anyway, that there's questions around that. The judge is looking into some stuff. We'll see what comes out of it.
Kudos to her for her backbone.
Yeah. There was some talk about her being biased, but I don't care. Look, truth is truth. So whether she's a Republican, Democrat, I don't care. What are the facts? Do the facts warrant the decision she's making? That's all that matters.
Yeah.
So, all this talk about, well, she's a Republican. I don't care. I don't care what she is. The facts are going to be the facts. She's a judge. She's supposed to look at the facts. So that's just what it is. But I agree. There's questions even about how Hunter Biden's gotten a lot of his money, how Joe Biden's gotten a lot of his money. Apparently that's being investigated. So
how do all these politicians get their money?
Yeah, we should be asking those questions.
How's Nancy Pelosi, in office for 50 years, making $200,000 a year, and she's worth like $200 million?
Yeah.
But anyway,
good questions. These are good questions we should be asking. But yeah, that's all I got.
I think we're good.
We're gonna wrap it. All right.
See you.
Peace.